There's an outlet there.
Okay.
I mean, I don't really care. Testing, testing, good. All right, let's hope today. Am I early? Oh, yeah. Based on a subscription, yes.
Would you say it's similar to the Google Drive example in the sense that depending on which aspect you're focusing on, it can be
Correct.
Okay.
So how many have started the CRM Essentials or the Salesforce homework? I know, Adam, you completed it, right? Is that software as a service, platform, or infrastructure, and why?
Software as a service?
It's software as a service, right? You pay a subscription fee to use the product, as long as you pay your license, right? Okay. Remember in the hardware, software, and mobile apps, we talked a little bit about how the cloud came to be, right? Why do we have this excess capacity that can be now leased or rented to clients based on need, right? We know that computing power doubles every 18 months. That's important because remember we talked about servers. If you're only using 20% of its capacity and you've replaced it every 3 to 5 years, wow, look at what you can do. Today, your laptop is equivalent to a mainframe when I first started working, right? And that mainframe was the size, I'm in KCB 101 teaching, right? It's an auditorium. That mainframe was double this room. And now that CPU processing is contained in your laptop, right? Storage doubles. And we kind of talked through the Amazon example, right? So they built these data centers all across the world in order to do, next day or very quick delivery, right, of goods and products. So with the servers comes storage. And they had all this excess storage. And they began to lease it out so that people could use it for backups, right? That they could store non-critical files. I told you Questrom tools. I use Amazon Web Services to store data sets. Why? It's cheap, and I don't have to use my own hardware to do it. And so if it's doubling and the price is relatively flat, I'm getting much more for the value now than I did 2 years ago, right? And then we talked about basically telecommunications or internet. We don't even think about it anymore. It's like a utility cost. You're assuming wherever you go, just like electricity, you plug in and you get service. And the same with the internet, right? We're now able to connect to cloud services all over the world using our web browser, right? Just like you do to your Google Suite. Again, as a review, it's important to remember client server, right? So client being your laptop, whether it's Mac or PC, doesn't matter, right? You have an internet connection, and servers being stored somewhere, right? That server can be on-premise, meaning at 810 Covington Ave, which is one of the data centers for BU, or it can be stored in a cloud. If I take many of those servers, I now have a cloud offering, right? I'm now asking the vendor to manage that. And that's infrastructure as a service. The other key is you can use different types of devices as input. So we talked about thin client being, the dumb terminals like you have in Mugar Library. You go up, you sign in, right? There's very basic storage, but it's primarily memory. And what you're really doing is connecting to a server and downloading a license to use for that session, right? Nothing's really stored on that computer, and it's metered, right? So they buy 250 Microsoft Office, 251, you get a busy signal, right? So I can use a thin client. I can use clearly, a traditional desktop or a laptop that has a lot of computing capacity. I now can use my mobile device, right? And so we saw that in chapter 1. Again, in chapter 3, that's the trend. Using that as the computing device. And now I have internet devices, right? Sensors that contain firmware that are passing data to some server in the cloud. Amazon based on your dishwasher or your refrigerator, a reuse point on detergent or milk or beer or whatever you have in the refrigerator, right? Or online grocery delivery, right? There's sensors on the shelf that measures your inventory, and it then sends up. Eggs look like they're half, we're going to do a reorder. Internet of Things to your cloud service provider, which could be Amazon Whole Foods, right? It could be Shaw's or Stop and Shop or whatever. Again, if you have questions, interrupt me, please. So, when we talk about cloud computing, we get this cloud over our own face, right? All cloud means is that the computing is being done in the internet. Cloud equals internet, okay? It's that simple. And rather than you doing it as a company, meaning I have hardware, software in my own data center or server room, I'm going to use a vendor to provide some of those services. Why? Well, if capacity doubles and storage doubles, right? And now they're pulling those resources here in the company, can't they offer it back to me cheaper than me individually buying my own dedicated resource, right? And so there's economies of scale. I'm also then focused in on my business, what I do best, right? Rather than having, in some cases, large IT teams in order to support. If you're a startup business, right, you're an entrepreneur, more than likely, you're going to use platform as a service, right, unless you're a software tech type firm. Why do I say that? Why would most entrepreneurs lean towards a platform as a service? Adam.
Infrastructure as a service requires more technical know-how in order to get a product that you want versus like software as a service it's a little more rigid than probably what you want to use.
Okay, so Adam said software as a service is a little bit more rigid. You're using the vendor's product, right? And you can tailor it a little bit, but you're paying a pretty mighty fee to use that. So if you're using a finance system or accounting system, right? You may not want to use that subscription base to start. If you're an entrepreneur, you probably, unless it's a tech firm, don't have a lot of staff. You probably don't have programmers or engineers, right? So you need something in the middle that allows you to develop your product, which is more than just storage or basic computing, but not full subscription, right? And you can make an argument that either platform or software would work, but it's really based on your product, as Adam indicated, right? Again, if I remove physical servers, right, off-site, now I'm not paying what? Electricity, air cooling, and some part of staff resources in order to support that, correct? Because now I'm using a vendor to do it. It's like outsourcing, right? I'm outsourcing the support of that equipment or application. Questions? Again, you know, the book has lots of different examples, and this comes from the book. The real key here is, you know, Amazon, you can get just-in-time storage resources for pennies. Because, again, storage doubles. They have all this capacity because they need the computing in order to deliver next-day delivery all around the world, right? Keep track of their inventory and products, right? So they have all this storage, so it costs pennies on the dollar. If you want additional storage, if you're an iOS device, a Mac, it's pretty cheap to buy iCloud storage, right? Why? There's economies of scale. They know you're going to pre-buy an allotment, but you're probably not going to use it all in day one, right? So there's a formula that they use to sort of balance out request and usage. Anybody know what term would best describe that? So it grows with you as you need it, but you only pay for what you use. Blank band. What kind of bands are there? Elastic. Elastic, right? Which means it grows and shrinks based on usage, right? It's available, it's pooled, right? So that's the concept, and you're only paying for what you're using. Again, you know, these are great to sort of remember, and the quiz will build on this, but you're going to have to apply these concepts to the application area that you're going to move to the cloud. More on that on Thursday. So availability and reliability. What does that mean? Uptime, right? Anybody here experienced the the Blackboard outage this morning? Right? That's a cloud vendor, by the way. And I would argue that our service level agreement probably needs to be tuned, right? Our peak window from 7:30 a.m. till 9:30 when classes end in the evening, there should be near 100% availability, uptime. There shouldn't be a performance lag, right? With cloud, the concept is the vendor should be able to bring additional resources on demand, right? And there shouldn't be any impact, but they need to tune their system. If you, I'm in KCB 1, and I'm looking around the room, there's probably, I don't know, 25 outlets. You would assume that if everybody plugged into the outlet, we shouldn't blow the fuse, right? That if you need electricity, it's there. And it's the same concept with availability and reliability. If you have a vendor providing you with server, storage, computing power on demand, then you should be able to meet. Does anybody know what scalability means? Matt?
How easy or difficult it is to add more cloud storage.
Right. So Matt said, how easy it is to add computing power or storage to the environment. It's a plug and play with the vendors because they have hundreds and hundreds of servers and storage, right? We looked at the diagram, I think, in the last class, which was a server farm. And it looked like a place where you kind of put your baked goods or refrigerator rack or whatever. You just keep on plugging in additional servers. So it's scalable, meaning I can add or subtract, just like Elastic, to meet the demand. Viability, what does that mean? So, again, these are very related. So viability means that it meets the need as expressed by the business, right? It is a sound solution. So when I was considering moving questrom tools off premise, out of my servers, I looked at vendors. I had them bid. What would it take for you to support this environment? Is your solution secure, sound, backed up? What's your reliability? What's your performance stats? What's your service level agreement, SOA, right? Please.
Oh, I was gonna ask you, like, what kind of, when you say focus on the cloud, right? Why people prefer the cloud? Are they based off of the same sort of, how would you describe something? You know what I mean? Like, are they based off the same programming method? You know what I mean? Okay, awesome. Never mind.
Okay. Question retracted. Security, privacy, and compliance. Now, this is a tricky one, right? Because if you are on a public cloud offering, meaning your data is also commingled on a server with other university data. Let's say it's BU, right? And there's a breach. The thought is they quickly, because they have more resources, they can respond. But your data could leak from your data set to another university's data set, right? So the thought on security in the book says, there's more resources to bear, that you have more experts, that they have more to lose. Amazon has more to lose for a security breach than an individual firm if they're handling, 100 banks' financial data. So therefore, they're going to respond quicker and have much more devices, appliances in place, right? There is a risk, though. How many here got a notice about Blackbaud late this summer? That your information may have been compromised. You did, Dan?
Yeah, I remember.
So Blackbaud is the vendor for alumni and donor relations system. All students, regardless of whether you donated or not, or your parents, are entered into the system when you get accepted to BU because, at some point you're going to be an alum and they're going to try to, solicit you to donate, right? So included in that would be your name, your address, your city, your state, your country. That was compromised, and so they had to put out a notice, right? But it was many universities that used them because it wasn't a private cloud, meaning I had a secure connection between BU and a dedicated set of cloud resources that no other university could use. So they had to put out a notice to hundreds of universities, okay? Compliance. Generally, especially if it's software as a service, and you're using the financial modules, right? Every year, the tax tables change, the laws change. The vendor's gonna implement it because it's best practice, and they need to be in compliance, right? You don't have to do it. And so you get the benefit of, economies of scale and applying that software change. Diversity of offerings. I love some of these terms. It just means that there's many cases a vendor can offer you many different modules that you could afford to purchase or license to use on your own, right? So I'm a small business. I clearly want their enterprise resource planning, but I don't need all of the HR modules. I clearly want benefits, compensation, and training. I'm not looking right now for retirement, pension planning, etc. And I only have a small number of employees, so I pay a small fee for those, right? Whereas on the accounts payable and payroll, I have a lot of employees and 1099s. And so I'm paying an additional fee to use those products. I have more offerings that I can pick and choose from, right? Openness, again, generally, they're using best standards available, state-of-the-art, whether it's programming languages, telecommunications, browsers, those type of things. And costs, again, tend to be lower because you either are reducing your headcount because you're using a vendor to supply some of those services, you're reducing your hardware software costs because you're leasing it from the vendor, or at the very least, you're cost avoiding, meaning you're taking that potential savings in headcount and applying them to do some other work that's required, right? And so there's a benefit there. Okay. Ask me questions. This is clear. All right. Public and private clouds, right? So a private cloud is either going to be BU by itself, right? So I'm Questrom School of Business. I am a subset of BU. I have my own servers. I have my own applications. But I'm using them to provide server shares to faculty and staff, infrastructure as a service. I bought that device. They are managing it. I don't have to worry about it. They're backing it up, right? They're doing security patches. All I do, or my staff, is assign folder size to new faculty or staff that come on board or expand, right? They do the remote backup, disaster recovery planning, the whole bit. Nobody else can use that device. Private cloud, Questrom, BU Central. A private cloud can also be, if I negotiated with Amazon and said, oh, don't put me on the traditional leased storage devices, dedicate 100 terabytes just to me, right? Nobody else can be on that server. I have a direct connect between me and the vendor. So it can either be me and BU or me and a vendor, right? Public cloud, again, you're using the internet, you're using your browser. It just means, sorry, when you have an 86-year-old mother, you never teach her to text or FaceTime. Oh, how you doing? Oh, I forgot you're in class. Sorry, I'll text you later. I'm like, all right, whatever. So sorry about that. But you're using a vendor resources and everybody else's too. So, good example. 2 years ago, if you were here in the school and you took classes outside of Questrom, Blackboard was hosted in the Seaport in Boston. They had a Blackboard has a data center there. It was a dedicated set of resources for BU only. It was a private cloud, but it was expensive because, again, we're not using all the capacity of the storage or the computing. So we renegotiated and they moved to their Pennsylvania center, which is a public cloud. We're using shared resources with other higher ed or universities, and our cost per student and faculty or user is much lower, right? And so, again, it's quicker, they can put more resources, but there's some risk, and that risk is more like data breaches or security. But again, if they have a breach on those servers and they're supporting 100 universities and it's your FERPA data, that's 100 lawsuits, right? So you know that they're going to be quick to act, but their security is probably better than an individual institution can provide, and especially if you're a smaller college, right? The U is fairly large. When does the cloud make sense? This is really important, right? So if the law requires you to be in physical possession of your data, right, then you wouldn't use the cloud. You would have it on premise. You might be able to negotiate a private cloud offering, but depends on how the law is written. So usually, what's HIPAA, by the way? Anybody know what HIPAA is? Adam?
It has to do with medical records.
It's your medical records, right? Like FERPA is educational records, HIPAA is medical. So when we do HIPAA research in Questrom, and we do, so we have, healthcare in the PEMA program, and there's a health sector management in undergrad. When I get that data, I have to maintain it on a separate device, separate server. And I have to sign that it cannot be accessed by anybody other than authorized users. It needs its own special firewall in front of it, in addition to the firewall that I have coming into Questrom anyways. What's a firewall? Firewall is an appliance that dictates approved traffic in and approved traffic out. Okay, it'll come up in the security chapter. It's lightly mentioned, and that concept-wise, that's the best way to look at it. It's like a traffic cop, right? You set what's allowed in. For example, on email, do you allow attached files to come into the org, or are they quarantined, right? Do you allow executables, program code? The answer would be absolutely not, right? Because then somebody could release a virus into your organization. Do you allow, as an organization, if I was a bank, do I allow Word docs, PDFs, pictures to be attached to email communications leaving the organization? You may not, because that could be, copyright material, sensitive information, right? So a firewall dictates traffic in, traffic out, and from where. It alerts you if there's an issue. Okay, this will again help you a little bit on the quiz. So, kind of as a recap, the cloud, I can do things a lot quicker because I'm actually using larger expertise, right? Whether it's software or platform or infrastructure, I've got more resources to bear rather than just my own talent pool, right? I can quickly add additional resources. Now think about this. If you were here, there's no freshmen. So in the spring, on spring break, after spring break, when we went completely remote, Zoom is a software as a service, on-demand video, right? And I'll grant you, they had some hiccups. But look at the millions and millions of clients that they are supporting. If we were to do our own video conference for the 15,000 undergrads and roughly about the same for grad and medical students, right? We would never have been able to get the equipment and support that infrastructure. We kept on building on them, and they kept on bringing in additional computing power, servers, storage, right? Appliances. So it made sense. They're able to be elastic, scale, viable. They did have some security issues, as we know, right? We had some drive-bys in classes. We had, some breaches. So now there's like the waiting room and the passwords and those type of things. But they're able to make the changes relatively quickly. Although, if you're a client, you want it even quicker. But imagine if we had to do that inside BU. You'd have to have some pretty big brain power and programming resources in order to effect those changes really quick, right? Generally, when you go into cloud computing, regardless of the model, your capital outlay tends to be less. Why? If I'm going to do team rooms, right, rather than look at an application that does conference room booking, let's call team rooms or conference rooms, right? Think about it. There's software as a service out there. I should be able to use a product like 25 Live. How many here have used that? It maintains all the classrooms here on BU, right? So it's the schedules. And it's software as a service. You pay based on the number of classrooms or conference rooms that you're putting into the system. And so we pay a fee. If I'm doing it in-house, I need a programmer, at least one, right? I need some sort of server share to put it on, right? That's going to also need electricity. It's going to need, some sort of replacement on a cycle. But if I'm just paying a flat fee, I can generally get in with the least amount of capital. I don't have to build my infrastructure first. And then, again, with team rooms, you need network connections, you need the ability for it to be accessible through mobile, Wi-Fi, Ethernet. So it becomes fairly complicated, right? It's fairly cheap for me to use a vendor to provide those offerings. I also, have ongoing support. So vendors put out new releases, right, of their tools, operating systems, browsers. You need security. You need to test, modify your application, and then deploy. I don't have to worry about that in platform as a service or software as a service. My vendor is doing that for me, right? In infrastructure, I'm more than likely doing that a little bit on my own because I'm really using them for basic computing or storage. I'm still doing security, database administration, those type of things, right? Now, again, you can look at this one of two ways. So, pre-COVID-19, when I moved Questrom tools to software as a service, I'm only paying $26,000 a year for 365-day support, one product upgrade every year, that works with my staff, all the courses, et cetera, that we're doing. Fairly inexpensive if you think about it, because we have over 5,000 users on the system. So you divide it out. That's pretty cheap, right? Okay. Now, COVID-19 hits, and budgets are frozen. The only negative that I can see using cloud hosting, I have no choice but to pay that fee, otherwise we do not have a learning management product, right? Whereas if you had it on premise, I could make a decision, you know what, I'm gonna wait 1 year to replace the hardware, 2 years. I'm gonna put a freeze on all PC replacements, right? So I'm gonna avoid that cost this year. You can't do it in cloud. Once you've committed to cloud, you must pay those annual fees, otherwise you can't use it. And so the BU strategy from Central IT, if you read their business plan, it clearly indicates cloud first. They're moving everything they can to the cloud. Again, in pre-pandemic times, it made sense because some of those systems are legacy, meaning supporting critical operations, but old, right? And so aren't the people supporting it, and they need to retire. I mean, honestly, it's becoming obsolete. But you can still make the choice of what you do, right? It's like if you own a car, let's say every 3 years, you get a new car, your parents do, right? Well, your budget's a little constricted. You can still use your current car, assuming it's working, right? For another year or another year. You have to pay the fee for cloud service. And that's probably the biggest issue I'm seeing right now. I have fixed cost in my budget that I can't do anything about. I must generate the revenue through tuition in order to meet those costs. I can't say, oh, I can do a 20% cut of my budget for this year because there's not that amount of discretion. And just to give you a sense, I mean, Questrom is pretty small. When I worked for Mass Water, my operating budget each year was about 12 million, and my capital budget was about 25 million. It was really big. Here, my personnel costs are about 1.4 million, and my non-personnel costs are about $1.6 million. So that's hardware, software, subscriptions, cloud service. Of that $1.6 million, roughly $1.2 million is required annual costs. I have to pay in order to use it. Any questions on that? This is thrilling, isn't it? I mean, you guys remote look so excited. Okay. So there's lots of different ways to illustrate the difference between on-premise and then, infrastructure, platform, or software. So this comes from the book. I'm going to give you my own. How many here like craft beer? Even if you're under 21, if you like it, raise your hand. No? Nobody drinks? Okay. Yeah.
Andrew likes it.
So,
Andrew likes it.
oh. Yay. Somebody. All right. So I'm home. I brew my own beer. Right? Now, I'm Italian, and so I sneak in a little limoncello to give the beer a crispness, right? I also use the bathtub in order to, I know it's pretty gross, but you know what, alcohol kills everything, right? But that bacteria from the bathtub adds a little bit of flavor. I make a mess everywhere. My wife hates me. But you know what? I like my beer and I give it away as gifts. I bottle it and I store it downstairs. And then when it's ready, I hand it out and I save a little bit for myself, right? So a year ago, we decided we're going to remodel the basement and move me out because she wants an activity room for the grandchildren. Well, they can go play at home. But I got kicked out. So I looked around and I found a storage place, right? You pay per month for storage like you would for furniture. And so I still make it at home, and I cart it, and I put it in my storage bin, and that's infrastructure as a service, right? I'm still doing everything on my own, and I'm using their services to store my beer bottles. I go there, collect it, put a bow on it, and give it away. I sneak a couple extra for myself. Nobody knows the difference. Okay. Well, she's really kind of ticked off at me because I still make a mess and I don't clean up. I'm still using the bathtub. And she's saying that her friends are complaining that when she goes into work, she smells like, a cross between beer and limoncello, and they're not sure what kind of cologne she's using, right? And I'm like, oh, all right, so what do you want me to do? Well, in Framingham, there's a brewery, and you can rent space to create your own beer. They have all the ingredients, and you choose what you want to make your brew. They supply you the bottles and all the ingredients. If they don't have it, they get it for you. I don't need to bring my dirty bathtub. I don't need to bring my limoncello. I choose. It's my unique crafted beer, but I'm using their facility to do it, right? They're providing me with the infrastructure and keeping the inventory up to date, right? And making sure that, whatever the health requirements are being met and the rules and those type of things. That's platform as a service, because any one of you that like to create craft beer can still use their facility, but make your own product, right? Maybe you put in blueberries or oranges or pomegranate, or, what do you put in edibles? CD. Yeah, maybe you put that edible stuff in your beer, and so now you're getting drunk and high at the same time. I don't know. But that would be platform as a service, right? Well, she got ticked off at me even worse, because not only now, because the house is clean, but that monthly bill was pretty good. She's like, you know what? You give away too much. Again, I'm Italian. I got to give away. I'm born on St. Patrick's Day. I like the beer. She's like, look, people don't reciprocate. We're stopping this crap. I'm going to put you on a monthly beer delivery. You get a 6-pack a month. Gee, thanks a lot, right? That's subscription as a service. She pays the bill, or I have to pay for it actually, and I get my 1 6-pack a month. Now I could increase it, you know that, but that's software as a service, right? You pay for usage. Does that make it a little bit clearer? So, again, oh, Chris, you like the beer too?
Very much so. That example had me glued the entire time.
See, what's kind of funny is on the exam, in the past, I had this open-ended question and students kind of like repeated, and I'm like, you know what, concretely, if it makes sense to you, then that's really great. And if you use that in an interview, if anybody ever asks you what cloud computing is, it's absolutely correct, right? And if you don't like to drink, we can think about some other examples. There's a pizza, if you fully make it at home, you have all your own ingredients, it's on premise, you're using your oven the whole bit, that's one thing. If you completely get it delivered, that would be software as a service, right? You pay, you get it. If you buy like cauliflower crust and whatever the bobbly or whatever it is, you're getting some of the ingredients, or you get, the pizzeria Uno, where it's frozen, but you have some side stuff that you can add. It's more like platform as a service. So there's lots of different examples. This one gives you a couple of examples of vendor products, right? So software as a service, Salesforce.com. Number one, customer relationship management. I keep on pounding that because lots of job opportunities out there, by the way. Whether you're marketing, finance, IS, they bought Tableau for 30 million or billion? I think it was million? Billion. It was billion, yes. So Tableau is data visualization. I mean, wow, think about it, right? There's a lot of opportunities there. But anyways, software as a service, you pay based on concurrent users or named users, right? So for Salesforce here at Questrom, I'm supporting the online MBA. There's 8 staff. I pay for 8 user licenses. The community portal where students can look at tasks, calendars, schedule an appointment, file an issue kind of like you do with Questrom Help. I pay per user, right? So right now in the online MBA, there's 400 students. In October, there's going to be another 400. So I pay per user. That's software as a service. Office 365. Microsoft wasn't stupid, right? You used to get individual software for your computer. And they delayed, people were delaying replacing it. So they're still on like, Office Vista and these old operating systems, and they're having some issues, right? Now, they've moved it to a cloud offering. You pay a monthly fee or you can pay annually, and you get the right to use it. The nice thing is they keep it up to date, but you're really renting. You don't own anything, right? It's a license to use. iCloud, the book calls it software as a service. I say depending on how you're using it, you could be software, meaning it's a subscription base, right? You pay, you get to use it, but you might more be using it for storage, right? If you're not using it for anything other than storage, it's probably infrastructure. Platform as a service. These are the 3 big players. The biggest is Amazon Web Services. And that's why to be negotiated with me for extra credit, you could in fact do the first fundamental cloud computing module. If you get the AWS fundamental certification, nothing in life is 100%, but I would say you're close to 100%, get an internship or a full-time job with Amazon, because they're in demand. It's a growing business, right? There's more certifications after that. The competitor to that is Microsoft Azure, right? That's just what it's called. And you too can get a certification there. Deloitte & Touche is a huge company, right, that's using it and has a building practice now that the government, Department of Defense, and others in DC are using it as its supporting environment, infrastructure and platform, right, developing applications. I have a woman who was in my class in the spring of 2018. She's graduating in December. She's from Peru. She's an international student. You know how hard it is for an international student in today's climate, A, to get an internship, and B, to get a full-time job, right? She's working for Microsoft starting in January. I have another student who you'll meet because she's the president of the Cybersecurity Club. Again, she was in my class fall of 2018, I think. She is also international. She's from Mexico. And again, for me, I love all students. But think about the climate that we're living in today, right? International, again, from Mexico, getting a job. Guess what? She's going to EY. Oh, you know. Who said EY? She is brilliant and ended up working on getting some of those certifications, right? So again, if you're going to be an IS concentrator, I can help you and I can suggest. I don't care what your grade is. I have a person who is over at Microsoft. He graduated with a 2.7 GPA. not the greatest, right? I mean, to me, grades are one thing, but his applicability, the ability to apply, right? I mean, was brilliant. He ended up getting these certifications, but he understood what he was doing. Some of this book stuff was busy work to him, and I could tend to agree on some classes, right? So there's lots of opportunities out there, and I suggest Salesforce or one of the cloud computing certs would help. Okay, this explains the book again, and it tells you, so each of these items, applications, data, runtime, middleware, are either services or roles that people do, right? So on-premise, meaning in my server room, in my data center, my staff are doing everything. In infrastructure, right, the green is being done by the vendor, basic, and the blue is being done by on-premise staff, my programmers. In platform, now you begin to see they're doing a lot of the heavy technical work, patching, security, virtualization, right? Server replacement, hardware, maintenance. I'm focused in only on my data, my applications. Software, the vendor is doing everything. You're just using the system to support your business, okay? Anybody, so we look at this grid computing. Anybody know or have an example other than my engineering student of grid computing? So cloud computing, and this is an easy way to remember this. Cloud computing, I'm applying lots of resources to meet lots of different business needs, right? It could be a client who needs storage, it could be another client who needs application. Grid computing, I'm combining lots of computers to meet a particular business need. Yes?
Blockchain?
Blockchain, absolutely. I would say hurricane weather prediction, right? It's a fairly complicated model. Behind that is a series of linked servers in order to meet that need. I don't know if I already told you this, I'm sorry if I repeat myself. I had a student, brilliant. He's on his third company. He's 28 years old. When he worked for me, he's like, Greg, after work, nobody's in the lab, and nobody's using the classroom computers. At that time, we had 90 lab computers and let's say 30 classrooms. That's 120 computers. Can I combine them? Because I want to create a 3D model. We used AutoCAD Maya to create a 3D model of his body. And so you press biceps and it would give you a year's worth of exercise routines. And this was like 8 years ago, okay? And so computing has really changed. He created a grid computer to satisfy one business need, which was a model of himself and an exercise database. So you combine resources to meet one particular need. This is pretty easy because we're right now doing voice over IP, right? And so you can provide video conference services because the technology is advanced, and I'm able to provide what used to be large bandwidth requirements, right? Storage. Think about the videos. Today, I can now add those to meet the need. And so you're getting a lot of what they call convergence, which means a blend, right? I'm no longer just data or just voice. I'm able to combine the two. And think about it, I'm talking, especially for those of you on Zoom, but I'm also sharing, right? And so I'm using both. All right, the book has lots and lots and lots of things. Again, some things I think are more important than others. I just think you should know the difference between a local area network, which is community-based, right? So if you are at home and you have a printer and your family is using that printer, that's a local area network. If you're in Questrom and you're in the undergrad lounge and you're using a printer assigned there, that's a local area network, right? It's defined to the community. Only Questrom can use it, or you have to be physically in that vicinity. Wide area network, right? It's an enterprise network. It's the BU 802.11, which is the wireless, .3, which is the Ethernet, right? Where I plug in. Defined for the whole enterprise. Every single company has a wide area network, right? And especially if you have multiple buildings and facilities, right? Okay. Personal area network, think about it, it's Bluetooth, right? And, you know, generally it's between you and a device. I will never test on this again because I think it's lame. But the internet, right, it's a network of networks. I mean, that to me is just a repeat of definitions. But what it's really saying is the internet, right, is all these company wide area networks connected. That's how we can share information. BU buys office goods from Staples and Office Max, or directly with Apple Computer for computers, or with Dell or HP, right? Our network is connected to their network, and it's through the internet. One of the students today said, hey, how do I study for your exam? I indicated that the best thing to do is there's a glossary at the end of the book, right, based on chapter, and the highlighted terms are there and gives you the definition. See if you understand those definitions, right? And I will go through the glossary before the exam for the chapters that we're going to be tested on, and I tell you what not to worry about, right? Even though it's open book, open glossary, I'm about you guys doing as best as you can. The other thing, the reason why it fits into what we're talking right now, I strongly recommend you answer the questions at the end of every chapter. This, in fact, is one of the questions at the end of the chapter. How would you, if it was an essay, compare the postal system to the internet, right? There's zip codes and addresses and naming convention, and, you know, it's the exact same thing, right? I would clearly look at those questions. And if you have a problem or a question about a question, you can put it in the poll that I released for chapters 3 and 4. You can ask it in class. You can ask it in review. You can even email me, right? But that's the best way. So that's why I included it here, was to give you kind of a sense of, you know, if this was on an exam, this would be 100. Not just because it's in the book, but it's pretty good. No sense of humor. Okay. So again, this chapter, you know, gives you the internet standards and communication and the whole bit. So how about if we break here? I have a one-pager that brings all this together, but a lot of this you're already going to know. HTTP is right? It's a transfer protocol. When you go out to the web, it's either going to be HTTP or HTTPS, right? S means secure, but it's a direct address for that website, right? It's where they exist in the internet. SMTP is how mail gets communicated. Exchange, Outlook, Gmail, right? So it's taking that software product, that business requirement, and it just has standards so that when you send me an email, it can be deciphered, right? In the same. FTP is the file transfer, how you get files from point A to point B. But I'll go through a little bit of that again before we break questions. And I'm sorry, these two chapters are kind of lecture heavy, but I'm doing this because I know what the take-home quiz is going to be. And I thought If I release it tomorrow, again, for you that were late, you can look at it. It's due on Saturday at 8. You then have an opportunity to ask me a few questions, either through the poll, through email, or direct in class, so that you can get the best submission, right? If you all get 100, great. I really want you to understand cloud computing because it does come up in interviews. Every single company just about that interviews on campus either is a cloud service provider or is using one to meet their business need. Accenture, right? Number one implementer of Salesforce, but other packages as well. HubSpot. They're a software as a service provider as well as consulting, right? Think about the big four. They do consulting practice, right? But they're helping to implement standard software as a service packages. Okay. Questions? Who wants to grab a craft beer with me virtually? No? All right. Anyways, again, go through the chapter. If you have any questions, let me know, but thank you. Oh, the black. Alan, are you still on?
Yeah, right here.
Put that on the poll, and I'll respond. Yes. There's a test and quiz,
Oh, okay.
right?